In Lesson 31, you'll learn about solving equations that include parentheses in them. And basically, you'll be applying the distributive property to these equations and to solving these equations. Now in Lesson 26, you learned to solve equations that had like terms in them, and you had to add the like terms first. Then you could use your addition rule, then your multiplication division rule to solve for the unknown variable in that equation. Now what you'll be doing, if you see parentheses in an equation, that's what you'll want to do first, is get rid of those parentheses. And usually you just use the distributive property to do that. For example, look at practice problem A. We have minus 4 parentheses 1 plus A equals 3 plus A. So we would distribute that minus 4 over the 1 and the A. And we do that first. So we'd say minus 4 times 1, that would just be a minus 4. And then plus a minus 4 times A. And then we just say equals 3 plus A. So now we can just rewrite that. Minus 4 minus 4A is equal to 3 plus A. Now we want to get our variable just on one side, so we'll add like terms to do that, and we'll use our addition rule. And I'll go ahead and move the A to the left side, and so I'll have to add a negative A to both sides. So I'll have minus 4 minus 5A is equal to 3. And then I'll use the addition rule again to get rid of the negative 4 on the left. And then I'll just have the A by itself, or the A and its coefficient anyway. So now I have minus 5A equals 7. And then I just do the division rule, divide both sides by negative 5. And those cancel on the left, and I end up with A equals 7 over negative 5. Now, anytime you have one negative sign in a division problem like that, the whole thing is negative, right? So we can just say negative 7/5. We can put the negative like in the middle there. It's the same thing as saying 7 over negative 5 or negative 7 over positive 5. If you just put the negative in the middle. So A is equal to negative 7/5. So now when you have an equation with parentheses and you're trying to solve it for its unknown, your first step will be to eliminate the parentheses, and you do that by using the distributive property. Then your next step, if you have like terms in the problem, if there's more than one place where there's a variable, then you need to add those like terms. And then finally, you use your addition and multiplication division rules as you need to isolate x, or isolate whatever the variable is. It may not be x, maybe a, like in this problem, but use those rules to isolate the variable. So always just keep in mind that your goal on these equations, when they say solve this equation, they want you to figure out what value that variable has in the equation. What value would make that a true statement? And so you just think, first thing, okay, I've got to isolate the variable. And like in problem A here, the A in the 1 plus A inside the parentheses, it's kind of like hidden inside the parentheses. And so you've got to unhide it or unlock it. And you do that by using the distributive property. And you get it out of the parentheses, get it out in the open, and then you use your addition rule to add like terms, and then do the addition rule again, then the multiplication division rule, and you're done. So in any problem, whether it's in algebra or maybe you're working on a car, there's certain tools that you need to use to be able to solve the problem. The distributive property, the addition rule, the multiplication rule, those are tools that you use to solve algebra equations. Of course, you have to know how to use the tools and when to use those tools as well in order to solve the problem correctly. Let's go ahead and do another problem and look at that practice problem B. You see that there are parentheses there, and that we could use the distributive property to start with to basically unlock or unhide our variables. They're hidden inside those parentheses. That's how we can think of that. And so let's just go ahead and start. And on the left there we have negative times 3b minus 2. Well, hopefully you've realized and you understand that anytime you have a negative outside, you're basically saying -1. And so you're multiplying both of the terms on the inside by a -1. And so we say -1 times 3b, so that would just be a -3b, and then -1 times a -2, and so that would just be a +2. And then on the right side we have 3 times 2b is 6b, and then plus 3 times 7 would be 21, and then add the -5 on at the end. So now let's go ahead and add like terms. Let's get the b's over on the left side, and so we would add a -6b to both sides. That cancels on the right, and we have a -9b plus 2 is equal to a 21 minus 5, so that would just equal 16. Now we can use the addition rule again to get the variable and its coefficient by themselves. And so we'll have -9b is equal to 14. And then the last thing we would do is the division rule. And I'm going to assume that you understand how to do the division rule. And so you would know that this answer would end up being -14 over 9. And we don't want to leave it like an improper fraction. We would say -1 5/9 as our answer. As you get more familiar with doing these problems and solving these equations, that last step there, a lot of times you can just do that one in your head. You don't have to show dividing both sides by -9 because you understand that's what you would do. So try to remember that when you see these problems and you have a term or a set of terms inside parentheses, some kind of an expression in parentheses, and a negative sign on the outside, it's just like multiplying the terms inside by -1. Let's do another one. Look at practice problem C. We see that we have parentheses there, and so our first step would be to use the distributive property. And actually, since we have like terms on the inside of our parentheses on this problem, it would probably be easier to simplify what's inside the parentheses first instead of using the distributive property. So that's something to keep in mind on these problems. If you have like terms on the inside of the parentheses, go ahead and simplify those first. So on the left, we would end up with -1 and then times c. And then that's equal to 8c plus 2 times a -8. And so then we just have a -c is equal to 8c minus 16. Now I can subtract 8c from both sides to get the c's just on one side, and I'd have -9c is equal to -16. And then divide both sides by a -9, and I end up with c is equal to -16 over -9. So we have a negative over a negative. That would be a positive value. And let's write this as a mixed number. And so we'll have 1 7/9 as an answer. So on that problem, we recognized that there were like terms inside the parentheses, and that's always what you should do on that, is just go ahead and add those together first. In the distributive property, we multiply first. Addition is usually an easier step, so do that addition first instead of doing the distributive property. Do your addition first, then do your multiplication. Let's do one more problem. Look at practice problem D. And we see that we have parentheses here, and the terms inside the parentheses are not like terms, so we won't start by adding those together. We'll just start by using our distributive property to get rid of the parentheses. And so on the left side we have negative times 5, so that would be -5. And then -1 times a -d, that would be a positive d. And then add that other d on. And then we have a 3. It's on the right side, but it's still a factor on the outside. We still use the distributive property to simplify that. So we say 3 times d, and then 3 times negative 9 is negative 27. Now let's go ahead and add like terms again. On the left here, negative 5 plus 2d is equal to 3d minus 27. And then we'll subtract 3d from both sides. Now look at what we can do here as well. If you want to do this, and you can just save yourself a little bit of time, we know we have to get that negative 5 over to the right side. So let's just go ahead and add 5 to both sides while we're changing the variable and moving the variable over to the left side. So we'll get the constant values, or the constant terms, over on the right at the same time. And so we cancel that, we cancel this, and then we end up with negative d is equal to negative 22. And so therefore d, just write it over here to the right, is equal to a positive 22. So that's a step there that I haven't done before like that. What I did was I did my addition rule twice in the same step, basically, so that I could get my variable over on the left and then my constant terms over on the right. Instead of taking 2 steps to do that, I just did it in 1 step. So hopefully you recognize that and you understood how to do that, and you can just save yourself an extra line on your paper, basically, if you do it that way. You're still showing your work, and it's still easy to see what you did. But doing it that way, it also shows that you really do understand how to use the addition rule. So when you're solving equations with parentheses in them, get those parentheses eliminated first. If the terms are not like terms on the inside of the parentheses, use the distributive property to get rid of the parentheses. If they are like terms, add them together first, then multiply by what's on the outside to get rid of your parentheses. Okay, well that's all for lesson 31.